Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Morticians of Reddit, what was the scariest thing you've ever experienced while at work? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I worked at a funeral home that wasn't in a great neighborhood, and one time when I was closing up at night to go home, I walked into the visitation room and found a homeless man sleeping on the couch. I had no idea how long he had been there, and I was all by myself and had been alone for most of the day. So I very quietly backed out of the room and commenced freaking out in the hallway. Then I called my manager and put her on speaker so that she could call the cops if I died, and I very politely woke the guy up and asked him to please never take a nap there again. Phew! Also, this has never actually happened, but the funeral home where I currently work serves the Chinese community a lot, and we will often have multiple decedents with extremely similar names at the same time, and I live in fear of mixing them up and sending the wrong body to the funeral. Disappointingly enough, I have never actually had a spooky, scary experience at work, even though I work in a really old building and we handle over 1,000 cases a year. All of my best work stories are just effing gross instead. Also, any post-ITT that mentions dead bodies sitting up, making large motions or loud sounds, or morticians chopping people up to fit them into the caskets, cremation, retorts is a lie. Just FYI. Like, we do a lot of weird things, but dismemberment is not one of them. Former medical examiner's office intern learned how to be an autopsy assistant. Overall, cases when the person is younger than you really stare mortality in the face. When someone comes in and they're 1 or 2 years younger than you, it feels like you're surpassed a milestone you didn't know existed. Friend of mine is a mortician. Her scariest incident happened very early in her career. She was alone and had music going and was walking past the drawers when one of the bodies kicked the door and popped the drawer open just a crack. For context, she knew all about bodies hissing and moaning and having minor twitches as the nervous system starts to settle and degrade. But this was a rare and extreme case where the major muscle in the leg gave a large twitch, causing a full kick. She had a panic attack and took the rest of the day off after calling hospital admin crying. Mortuary transporter here. Nothing too crazy, but making my first after-hours drop-off by myself. I pull up to the crematory at around 10 p.m. Lights are off and the door alarm is on, so I flip those and bring my 2 bodies in. I'm weighing them, and then I hear thumps coming from inside the retort oven. I stop what I'm doing and get really still. The ovens are off and there's just the humming of the fluorescents. I wait like that for 10 seconds, nothing. So I go back to getting the bodies boxed. Then I hear it again, a few muffled bangs from inside the retort. I tell myself one of 2 things is happening. Either A, the retorts burn hot as shit during the day, 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, they probably expand and contract as they cool. Or B, there's an effing grudge demon living in there and it's gonna scamper up the effing ceiling and drop on me. I weighed both options in my mind and decided that if it was a monster, then I was already dead. So best thing to do was get the job over and with quickly and efficiently and go the F home. The next day, I brought it up with a crematory operator, and he laughed and said it was just them cooling, and that, yeah, it's freaky the first time. So all in all, it was kind of funny in hindsight, but hearing thumping sounds in the middle of the night in a building that's already filled with dead bodies for about 5 seconds there was mortal terror. There's been some really gross shit I've seen, but that was the scariest. Potential murderer or potential spouse? Sometimes the lines get pretty blurry. Not exactly the answer you're looking for, but my apartment burned down last March. A week or 2 later, I met a mortician at a party. I told her about the fire and she said, "Oh man, too bad you didn't die. I would have received your body." LOL, she sounded very disappointed. Not a mortician, but worked at a flower shop that often delivered to funeral homes. We often enter through the back doors where the bodies are kept. If you have never been to a funeral home, good for you, I hope it continues that way. A lot of funeral homes have carpets and a lot of curtains as separators between rooms. So now that I have painted the picture, I went with this lovely arrangement to drop off at a funeral home. We, myself and the driver, enter through the back same as usual. The thing is huge, so we put it down and I hold it to make sure it doesn't tip over. The driver goes to look for the mortician or the administrator, leaving me in the back. I'm now hiding this giant flower arrangement with 4 different bodies around me. 2 in caskets over to the left on what looks like a big showroom, another to the right in another large room farther away, and 1 right next to me in a smaller room a little ways away. This room had a parallel A room that was closed by a curtain behind me. There was probably another body back there, but I'm trying not to think about anything that morbid. There are red curtains everywhere. Why red? Why couldn't they have picked out a nicer color, perhaps one that couldn't be found in an old haunted mansion? The carpet is old, and the entire thing smelled of mold. I'm trying to just stay calm, willing the driver to mentally hurry the F up. All of a sudden, the curtain behind me gets thrown open, and I hear someone say, "Is that for here?" Y'all, I damn near shat bricks. I couldn't feel my face, I was so scared. My heart dropped somewhere near the abyss. My lungs stopped working properly. My entire body just said F you. But I'm telling you, as I sit here years later, that mother effer did it on purpose. He saw an opportunity and took it. The driver showed up a few seconds later, saw my face, which probably didn't have a single drop of blood in it. The other MF started dying of laughter. Pretty sure they peed themselves a little. Tossed the stupid flowers and drove us back to the store as soon as I could. I effing hate funeral homes. If something like this happened to you, how would you react? My first autopsy was in a special pressurized room because the body was in a very advanced state of decomposition. It was that of an older man, had died at home and not been found until neighbors reported an odor. We performed a full autopsy. I can still smell it nearly 20 years later. A few years later, I was teaching an assistant to embalm. The body had a colostomy, which I had sutured, but there was a lot of pressure buildup in the abdominal cavity. Assistant leaned over of the sutures and they popped wide open, spitting a geyser of formaldehyde, blood, and feces all over her. She never returned to help assist after that. For reference, this was anatomical embalming in a university mortuary. We were going for increased pressure. Ugh. One of my uncles works for the government in Mexico. He's got a mortician coroner friend, and he told us the following story. There was a bad shooting between cartels and the local federal police. About 11 dead total, cops and sicarios combined. The cartel sent a message that they wanted the bodies or else. So the bodies were brought to the friend mortician to hold and process. They told him that there will be an officer on guard outside. After a very long day that turned into night, he noticed that the guard was just standing outside of the door in the hallway, think double doors with rectangle windows, where the other bodies were being held as there was no space. And that was weird since he didn't have a view of the outside from the location. He made enough space to fit the rest of the bodies in the cooler, though a little tight. He went to open the door and greeted the officer outside the door, but he was gone. 1 second there and then gone. He chucked it off to tiredness and continued on. He walks outside to head home and he noticed a patrol car parked at the front. So he walked over and said, "Hey, why did you come outside all of a sudden? I thought you were keeping an eye on me." And the guy said, "Sir, I've been outside all day long. Was there someone else inside?" So they both ran inside to investigate who was standing there, but there was nobody in the hallway. They went to the cooler, and when they opened the cooler and were shocked, there were upper half of the squad commander standing at guard over the dead. From the waist up only, military pose, chin up. He lost his life leading the men and was guarding them afterwards. They said he disappeared slowly in front of their eyes. He says that every now and then, when they bring in victims of sudden death, he can feel the presence of someone in the room, and he believes it's the energy of the deceased trying to figure out what happened. He reads the report out loud, and that usually makes them leave. He also said he loves his job, and these minor inconveniences don't bother him at all, as he considers himself a man of science and thinks there is an answer to this, but he sure doesn't have it. I worked at a mortuary for a year when I was in high school. It was the same place my father and grandfather had their wakes. I was upstairs filing paperwork when I stumbled upon my father's folder. Right as I had opened it, the door slammed shut. There was no wind or reason. It scared the ever-living shit out of me. When my mom picked me up from work, she told me Heath Ledger had died. He was an actor my father and I both really liked, especially in A Knight's Tale. I worked in a funeral home for a bit, not as an embalmer or funeral director. Ironically, I found the scariest part to be the people who would come in terrified of my coworkers and I. People would be jumpy and aggressive because they expected us to be mean, yell at them, or deny access to the building. None of those things were my job. I have no clue why people would think we would want to torture them. Not a mortician, but my mother is a nurse, and during her training days in the late 90s, the hospital she was working in didn't have a dedicated staff for handling the mortuary. As such, the nurses were handling it themselves. One time, an old man suffering from pneumonia was declared dead and brought to the mortuary. This was already at night, and the nurse attending the body had just finished her work shift. Leaving the body in the room, she went to hand over the duty to the next nurse, who was a trainee. It was already midnight, and the new nurse went to perform her duties in the mortuary, only for the whole hospital to echo with her screams. This is a small, quiet hospital, and everyone, including my mother who heard it, rushed to the spot of the scream to find the young trainee pale and saying he's alive. Most of the members were young trainees, and they did not dare open the door, and the guard, who was superstitious, refused to aid them until the nursing superintendent came, and together they opened the door and found the old man sitting on the metal bed. He was dazed and confused and paid no heed to the crowd surrounding him. Later, it came to light that the old man had died or shown signs of being dead-like. I'm not sure what it was, but later he came back to life. However, it was only for a short while. As soon as he went back to being dead as a result of the formalin injection to extend dead bodies from decaying soon. The aftermath wasn't pretty either, as the patient party accused the hospital of negligence, and there was some sort of drama for a short while. Not a mortician myself, but my daughter's fiance is, and she said that usually the living family members are scarier than the deceased. She had a woman threaten to cut her when, upon seeing the deceased laid out in the casket, she, the family member, didn't like the shirt the deceased was wearing and demanded her daughter's fiance to change it immediately. She, family member, had to be removed when she started raising hell about it. She has seen fistfights break out in 3 different instances, and one resulted in the casket being knocked over and 4 people being arrested after the police were called by staff. As far as the deceased, she said the one time she got really freaked out was when she had the extremely rare incident of seeing a body sit up on her as her and her coworker were prepping to embalm it. Of all the stories I read today, this for me was the most disturbing. Not a mortician, but related, and I just want to vent to show what a shitty species we are. With modern technology comes new things like online funerals, streamed to family members who can't attend funerals, online memorial walls, etc., and that is where I come in. I was in charge of moderating and making edits and corrections to online memorial pages where family members and friends posted comments. For the most part, comments, condolences, and memories, but there were a few situations that got out of hand. One I remember was a young girl who had clearly committed suicide, had someone organize people at her high school to comment bomb and leave messages about how much they were glad she killed herself, and a lot of other dreadful things. It just made me feel like boys get into fights and that's about it, but girls will drive someone they don't like to suicide and then still won't let it go and do anything they can to shame them even after they are dead. High school girls are effing brutal. Same here, not as a mortician, but the mother of my BFF growing up owned a flower shop. When I was around 17, her parents were out of town, and I had stayed over with my friend. About 10 to 11 that night, her mom calls freaking out that she had forgotten to take something so important to the funeral parlor, and we absolutely had to take it out there. We were trying so hard on the way over there to be professional and not act like the complete scared assholes we were. We go in, and God forgive me, the little lady looks like the Bride of Frankenstein anyway. My friend reaches over the casket to place a picture on a flower stand directly behind it. All of a sudden, It was like the lady had just taken the deepest breath of her life. We just about knocked the casket over and broke every bone in our bodies trying to make record-breaking time to get the F out of there. When we called her mom to explain what had happened, she tells us that sometimes after embalming, the bodies settle and release gases, and that is why it sounded like she had taken a breath. Never ever will I go to a funeral home after dark, not even when I die. At the time, it was truly terrifying. Needless to say, her mother never asked for our help again. Not a mortician myself, but for that mortician who was on that one episode of IASIC, the children's pageant one, his most terrifying experience is probably getting requests from Danny DeVito to have his makeup done like a dead person from a funeral and then being asked about having intercourse with the dead bodies.